The Laughing Demon. Since it was already noon, and my mother-in-law, supposed to be working in the rice fields in the morning, had yet to return, I asked my 11-year-old son to go check on her. "Yes," he said, then immediately put down his manga he was reading and stood up. I was often surprised by how obedient this kid was. Were all children so obedient? I couldn't think of a single time he came off as unmotivated or peeved when I asked something out of him. Rather than rejoicing about how great of a kid he was, I couldn't help but feel uneasy, thinking he was missing something vital. Even though I knew full well I was fooling myself. "I'm leaving." He got on his bike and ran off. He didn't cause any trouble at school. I couldn't have hoped for a son easier to raise. He studied on his own volition, moderated his playtime, and seemed to have lots of friends. Back when I was a child, I remember spending my days complaining and worrying about anything and everything. I would often contradict my parents, and I hated the building and area we lived in. I say that, but I seem to have completely gone in the opposite direction to what my resentful self from back then would have wanted by marrying into a family living so deep in the mountains of West Akatsuki. Which made me feel all of what I'd done back then was pointless. But I guess it couldn't be helped. That's what being young does to you. I knew kids weren't supposed to be exact copies of their parents, and I completely understood that comparing myself to him was pointless. So I resolved myself to stop doing that. A few minutes later, as I was still preparing lunch, I got a phone call. It was from my son's phone. I answered. "Yes? Something happened?" I can't seem to pull Grandma's legs out of the field," said my son with a shaky voice. Was he crying? "Pull? So she got stuck in the mud? Grandma must have been carrying a shovel or something. Why don't you try using that to dig the mud around her legs a little bit? Should be much easier than pulling it all out at once." "Uh-huh." I could hear him breathing his snot. Huh? How unusual. He had cried a few times in preschool, but ever since then, almost never. It had been roughly 7 years since he'd last cried. And after all that, he cried because of the leg of his grandma was stuck in a rice field. How is he crying over something so trivial? He couldn't get his leg out of his mud, he said. It definitely wasn't something to cry over. It's so funny. I couldn't hold back and bursted out laughing. It had been so long since I'd laughed that much. It had made me all kinds of happy. My son was so cute. I thought I'd had my fill, but then he returned with my mother-in-law covered in mud. I ridiculed him some more while laughing. "Are you stupid? Think about it. Getting a leg out of mud isn't that hard. You gotta use your head," I said in a preachy tone, insulting him, and then, in front of me, he bursted out crying. That sight gave me a feeling of happiness and relief. It seemed I derived that from bullying my son. Later that day, I sneered at my son and his non-existent quick-wittedness for the whole lunch. I mocked him by saying things like, "If you can't even do that, nothing will go well in your life," or "You will face many more such hardships in the future. I'm worried you won't be able to deal with them alone." And once again, he cried. I told him that was annoying behaviour for weaklings, so I didn't allow him to have dinner into the evening under the pretenses of making him stronger. My husband, who had just come from home, and my mother-in-law insisted he should eat, so I went to his room, but when I nagged at him in a small voice, he cried again. I thought to myself, so it was that easy to make him cry? It's a miracle he didn't until now. A bit of a letdown even. Feeling a rush from adrenaline and joy and comfort, I realised the boy wasn't spectacular at all. I'd been fooled by him only showing his good sides. What a cunning little bastard. And so, with these passionate feelings awakening my maternal instinct, I resolved myself to see my son's real self. To this end, I continued to torment him. By the way, I did technically end up allowing him to eat that night, but he never showed up at the table. When I called him, he said he wasn't hungry, just as expected. From that point onward, whenever I tormented him, he would cry and weaken, his attitude and behaviour would wither, and all the good sides he'd been showing dwindled until becoming nothing. He ended up only having bad traits. If this was his real self, I had to torment him more, to make my son stronger, to make him the good son he should have been from the start. When he became a 6th grader in elementary school and attempted to take his life for the first time, I got angry at him for being so weak. But on the second attempt, I realised I would have no one to be angry at if he succeeded. Then, I thought I had realised how distorted my love had become. On his third attempt, since entering middle school, that realisation became firmer. This was bad. I've been toying with him too much. But when I thought that to myself, I came to recognise my love towards my son had long gone. I was a demon. At least, I'd once been a normal human being, a mother, but now I wasn't a mother anymore. Not even a human being. Why did this happen? I didn't get it. On the night of that realisation, I wept in bed. I cried using all the sentiments I could gather of my former self. My husband, who was sleeping next to me, woke up and silently stared at me, crying in bed. I'm sorry for waking you up. I'm sorry for breaking our son. I'm sorry for having changed without noticing myself. But before I could mouth any of this, my husband burst out laughing. Why are you crying? Idiot, how stupid must you be? He continued to laugh, a genuine laughter, while holding his stomach. I knew what that laughter was. He continued, so easily, for just that. What are you on about? Oh, love or something? That's so dumb. That stuff about being a mother or a human being. Are you high? It was the same. My husband was becoming the same thing as I. That thing which possessed me on that day with the rice field incident. It was now trying to enter the mind and body of my husband. In a desperate attempt, I brought my husband to a Blackbeard shrine. Once there, we underwent an exorcism. It felt like I was dying, and in reality, I think something in me had died. But at least, that thing which had been invading my husband and I had disappeared. Then, when I returned home, I knew hell was awaiting me. Even knowing the reason for my actions, my son wouldn't forgive me. My husband and my mother-in-law were afraid of me and avoided any contact with me. And finally, I couldn't feel any yearning for them in my heart. I no longer could desire the warmth our family once had. Our affection was dead. Absolutely dead. Already past the point of no return. That death hadn't left any fertile soil for a new love to grow. But even then, we continued to be a family. The husk of one. In front of that overwhelming emptiness, I even started to feel nostalgic about the excitement I would get from tormenting my son. The demon was still inside me. Even though I'd been possessed by something to become a demon, one must have somewhere been one from the beginning, to become one.